Check 1 2. There we go. Test 1 2. All right. So yeah, finally, I don't know what happened. My son was home for a couple days. This is his computer. So he must have changed some setting that then turned off the microphone so that I couldn't use it. So not sure. Wow. So what a fun way to start. Well, welcome and thank you for tolerating that short delay until I figured it out. I think we're all set to go. Anyway, speaking of my son who was home for a couple of days, he has been working at an amusement park in Minneapolis, and he had a job interview, and he needed his computer set up. He is a meteorologist, so he needed his computer with all of his screens to be able to work through. So he had like a 6 hour, maybe it was even longer than that, but it was at least planned to be a 6 hour intensive working interview where it was kind of maybe more like a job shadow where he watched some things, he did some work, they watched him work, they evaluated his work, they worked with him on some stuff, and at the end of it, he got a job. So that's fantastic. He'll be moving back home in 2 weeks to continue to live in our basement because he graduated from college during COVID and has been trying to find a job ever since. So he's been, since May of last year, looking for a job and interviewing all over the world, honestly. He applied to Guam and Germany and the Netherlands, and as well as all over the U.S. And he's finally got a job, which is, the company's in Kansas, but he will work remote. So he just gets to move back home and save money and pay off debt that he's accumulated from college and start his career. So we're super excited about that. So is he. But I'm doing something a little bit different than I've done the last few, which some of it has been focused on a question or a thought or a single scripture passage. And so I'm actually kind of looking at scripture passages I'm planning on for Sunday, which is different than I normally do. But I'm starting with this quote: the greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips and walk out the door and deny him with their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. I like that quote. I heard another pastor use it. I'm not a person that does a lot of quotes, but I thought that summarized things incredibly well. So maybe if you do attend a worship service, you have pastors who might pick a theme and jump around and look at a bunch of scriptures. Or you might have a tradition that reads certain scriptures on a regular schedule like Pastor Brock does. He probably, along with his appointed text, has done the lectionary, which has appointed text for Sundays as well. And there will often be 2 or 3 sections, and sometimes you read them all and you preach on one, or you preach on trying to cover all of them. There's usually trying to have a unified theme, or some people just pick a book of the Bible and preach through it from beginning to end. I'm doing kind of a different thing here I haven't done before. So I'm looking at 1 John, and I'm trying to pull themes that John has through it. It's an interesting thing when you read through 1 John that John will say one thing, say another thing, say 2 or 3 more things, then come back to the first thing he said and repeat it. Sometimes he repeats it verbatim, and sometimes he repeats the idea again. Sometimes he just talks about it in depth. And so that's kind of what I was trying to find, is those running themes through his gospel, or not this gospel, the letter of 1 John, the gospel, not John. And then there's some debate of is it the same John? that wrote the Gospel of John, and is it the same John that wrote 2nd and 3rd John? And I'm not worried about that. Doesn't matter to me. I think it is, but you can make arguments either way. So I'm looking through. I am looking at the if and the yet and the but in this passage, and just the contrasting nature that he is addressing that we live out. And I'm also focused on this idea of we as a whole. And that's really been, and I think I may have mentioned this in a couple of streams earlier this week with just thoughts and questions with different people on how is it in a Western thinking, individualistic society that we can fully grasp and understand how we are together and how we impact and affect one another and how we are judged as one. And so as I was thinking about that and trying to think through that, sports teams might be a way that we can think about it, that our team won or our team lost, and we may or may not be on the team. And this happened when my kids were in school or when I was coaching, where an individual or a couple of individuals on a team would exhibit a certain behavior, and then the whole of the group would be labeled that. And so it would be given to the whole. That team would be associated with whatever behavior had taken place or whatever action had been taken place, and you did not separate the individual from the group. So maybe that's a place where we can begin to grasp this concept of we as a whole. So in this passage it says, if we claim to have fellowship with him, yet walk in darkness, we lie and do not live out the truth. But if we walk in the light, as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus Christ, his Son, purifies us from all sin. If we claim to be without sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. If we confess our sins... Oh, sorry. Did I read that right? If we confess our sins... I must have a slide wrong here. Must live as Jesus did. I'm missing the next part of that. If we confess our sins, but anyway. Anyone who claims to be in the light but hates a brother or sister is still in darkness. Anyone who loves his brother or sister lives in the light, and there is nothing in them to make them stumble. But anyone who hates his brother or sister is in the darkness and walks around in darkness. They do not know. Wow, this is in a weird order. I need to check these before Sunday, apparently. Hey, Cookies and Psalms with a rating party of 11. Wow, thank you. I was just reading through part of 1 John here and focused on how there's a collective we that maybe we don't understand all the time. And so I was going to look at that in 1 John, how we behave and how that represents the whole of a group. And sometimes we only think about individuals and my impact, and then not taking responsibility for the group because I didn't do it. So as I was thinking about examples of this and trying to help figure out what that might look like, when I was in 8th grade, we had sports assemblies that would happen every semester with or fall sports, winter sports, spring sports. And the 8th grade was not in the same building as the high school. It was a mile away. And the 8th graders would assemble without chaperones, walk over to the high school for the assembly. Then without chaperones, after the assembly, we would walk back to the middle school. Now, part of the reason they did this was, while it was 1 mile to walk, the road system, you had to go around. And it was a 3-mile bus ride to go from one school to the other, but it was only a 1-mile walk. So they let us walk, and they'd done this for years. And I don't recall which assembly it was. It wasn't fall because I wasn't in a fall sport in 8th grade, so it may have been winter sport at the end of it, or yeah, it was most likely that, but it could have been spring sport. When we went to walk to the assembly, we all walked over there. And following the assembly, a group of us decided that we wanted to go for donuts. There was a donut shop that was in the opposite direction of walking back to the middle school. And so we walked over there. We had our donuts. We didn't immediately go back. We enjoyed our donuts. And then we took our time walking back to class. Well, unfortunately, not everyone went with us. That's how I say it. Unfortunately, not everyone went with us. Some of the students went back immediately, and then there was this gap between their arrival and our arrival. Some of us a half an hour later, some of us 45 minutes later, some of us an hour later. The next time there was a sports assembly, we were bussed. They didn't. Well, those of us who came back late also had detention or something like that for individual punishment. However, the whole of the school from that point on got bussed back and forth to the assembly because we, as part of the collective of the 8th graders who went, did not do as we should have, and so the whole faced the consequences of that. And my younger siblings still give me a hard time about that, and I'm okay with that decision because it really wasn't something too consequential. However, in some ways, it's kind of funny that we did that, and then later generations have consequences from my particular actions. And I share that because it's kind of funny and it's kind of silly, but the reality is our actions when we are identified with any group influence how people see that particular group. And so that's why I was looking here at 1 John, and I'm going to go to this other quote that kind of helps summarize some of what's driving this. And this is from Brennan Manning. He was a pretty well-known author, and he said, "The greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips and walk out the door and deny him with their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable." So that's kind of where I'm going, and then I'm focusing on the we collective of our actions and how what our tendency would be is to say, well, I didn't do that, so then how can I be held responsible? I didn't do that, so don't blame me for that. I didn't do it. But if we wear and we bear the title, then we're part of that group, whether we want to be or we don't want to be. Another thought I had was, if you purchase a house and it has bad electrical, and you choose to do nothing about the bad electrical, there are potential risks that you're taking. And if your house burns down because of bad electrical that you didn't install and you didn't damage, it doesn't matter. You had the ability to take action, to change it, to correct it, and you didn't. And then you bear the consequences of what you inherited or you purchased, depending on how you got the house. But you still inherit all of those things that were done improperly and done incorrectly, or just over time became damaged or became outdated. So in that same way, we need to begin to focus and understand that there's a we-ness to everything that we do, and we impact everyone who is included in that we-ness. And that's a weird word. I know I'm creating a we-ness, but and it's the we together and how we impact and are part of one another. So going back to the scripture passage here, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with action and in truth. I just find this whole concept mind-boggling in some sense, that we can claim to love God and turn around and then not love other people. And it can happen in lots of different ways. And one of the things that we do is we justify ourselves when we don't take action. We can say, well, I don't have sources or funds to be able to help that person. We even, when we have corporate or church activities and stuff, we then excuse any personal involvement because the church is doing it. I don't have to, or I gave my money to it, so I don't have to actually meet or deal with those kinds of people. I was just in South Dakota last week. I think I'd shared that with a few of you, that I was going there to visit a church that I had previously worked with. And I was hearing about one of the new things that they were doing, which sounded fantastic. They have gotten a partnership with the local laundromat. There's an app in which people can say, I need assistance with doing laundry. And then a person from the church and community can sign up and go a specific day and time and pay for the laundry, pay for the soap, pay for everything using the app, and or I guess they bring the soap. I'm not entirely sure on all those details. But they go there, and then while the laundry's being done, they have a conversation with the person. And I thought, wow, this sounds fantastic. I would love to do that. I'd love to see that in my community. And then as they continued talking about it, they said, yeah, the church likes to talk about that they do this, and there's 2 or 3 of us that do it. That's it. A lot of the other people, they don't want to go and associate with the people who have to go to the laundromat. They have no interest whatsoever in sitting and having a conversation with someone who's in that state of life, that can't afford to have a washing machine and a dryer, whether it's a rental or whether it's their own home. They just don't want to go and associate with that kind of a lowly person. And I just thought, what a horrible missed opportunity. I mean, to say, yeah, we'll support it with money, but I don't want to associate with that person or come anywhere near them or be around them was just, it's just sad. And so it's just kind of like this, they have no pity on them. They have no compassion. They're not moved by the fact that someone else is not as well off as they are. I just don't know how, in some sense, to bring people to an understanding that if you have a roof over your head, if you don't have to worry about electricity, if you don't have to worry about heating or in the summer, air conditioning, if you don't have to worry about those things because they're taken care of, because your finances and your employment is stable, you are blessed beyond measure. The majority of people that have ever lived didn't know always where their next meal was coming from, not because they didn't plan or prepare. Some of it is because they were foragers or hunter-gatherers. But the majority of the world doesn't live, and hasn't throughout time, and some of this has to do with modern electricity and refrigeration. They didn't live with storehouses of food. We have the capacity, and I'm not saying anybody here is or does or whatever, but I'm saying we have the capacity to have storehouses of food. We have the capacity to have enough food, and I've got, let me see, I've got an upright freezer. It's a small miniature one. I call it my blueberry storage device. It's an inside joke. I won't go into that. But it's a small mini upright. If you think of a mini fridge, it's like that dimension square, but it's almost as tall. It's about maybe 5.5 feet tall, something like that. And so that's an upright, and I have that one. And then I have a chest freezer, which is actually my son's, but I have it full of meat. So that one's full, and then my regular refrigerator has a freezer on it. So I have 3 freezers that I have food stored in. And then I've got canned food. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I canned a bunch of potatoes. I canned like 5 dozen, maybe 4.5, whatever it was, cans of potatoes. I've got all kinds of other canned food as well. I have no shortage of food. I'm not going to have a shortage of food. That's a huge, huge blessing. So I should have pity on someone when I see them and they're in need. Now, to also then bring this back, I also, when I have pity on someone, should not think of myself better than them. I'm blessed by God. That's why I'm blessed. I can't judge their circumstance and where they're at, and I should not feel righteous for doing something that shows compassion to someone else. I should just feel that I should have compassion for someone else. So I'll tell you another story where when I was in seminary, didn't have a lot of money all the time. We went to the food pantry that the seminary had. We went to the clothes closet that the seminary had. Our kids got all the peanut butter and jelly they wanted because I got it from the food pantry. I got all the tuna fish I wanted because we got it from the food pantry. And every Tuesday was spaghetti night because I got it from the food pantry. I've never liked spaghetti in my entire life. Hated it when I was a kid. And so it was still what I had every Tuesday for 4 years. It was still food. I was still blessed. I still had it. And so it would be wonderful when I would have enough funds to be able to go out to eat during lunch. I had a friend that we occasionally did that. We had a set kind of thing that if this happened, then the next day or the next day we were both able to, we would go to a particular fast food restaurant and have a meal. But there also was a Burger King that was a few blocks away that almost continuously had 99-cent Whoppers. So all I needed to do was scrape together a few dollars and I could go there to eat. And so I loved to be able to do that. I just wasn't regularly able to. But when I did have that, I could go there. I would do that. And so I'm pulling in the parking lot one day, and I'm getting out, and I had made some really good tips. I delivered pizza. I made some really good tips the past week. Our bills were paid. I had a little extra change in my pocket, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to go out to eat. I could afford to do it. I'm going to do it once, and I can't do it every day. So this is the time I got to go. So I'm pulling out of the vehicle, or getting out of the vehicle, and there's a gentleman walking up to me. Okay. And he says, hey, can you spare some money so that I can get something to eat? And I said, how about you and I go in together, and I'll buy you a meal? Okay. He said, great. So I went in, I ordered my Whopper with fries and a drink, and I bought him the same. He said he was fine with that. He goes, great, we'll have the same meal together. So we're going to sit, we're going to have the same meal. Talking with him, found out he was a painter, found out some other things about his life, and I noticed he ate half of his Whopper, and he wrapped it up. He ate about half of his fries, and then he left them. He drank his beverage, and he went up and got another refill. And then about that time that we'd been there for a while, and he'd kind of only eaten half of his food, he excused himself, said thank you very much, and he left. And I watched as he left. And as soon as he walked out the door of the Burger King, another individual who apparently also was homeless came up to him, and he gave him half the burger, half the fries, and the beverage. And I went from feeling like I'm doing a great service to someone to feeling incredibly small, because he had so much compassion on his friend. He gave him half his food that he'd received. That is really what this piece is driving home, is if you see a brother or sister in need, even if you yourself are in the same state and you don't have pity on them, then how can the love of God be in you? If the first thing you're doing is judging that person for, if they were reliable and if they were responsible and if they didn't have this problem or they didn't have that problem, they wouldn't be homeless. What a horrible, horrible thought. Because homelessness can happen to anybody. You're only a few mistakes away from that happening to you. Thanks, Miss Jellybeans. That's a pretty cool heart. Yeah, I might get upset about this. It bugs me incredibly. I actually saw recently a video that was talking about a program orientation to deal with homelessness called Housing First. And what we often do, especially in the West, is we will require people to go through some, if they have an alcohol problem, is to become off of alcohol. And then we will have them have to have some kind of employment, sustainable. And then we make them jump through all of these steps. And then when they get to the end and they prove themselves, which are all difficult things, then we'll bless them with housing that we choose. And then by that point, I'm trying to remember what the numbers were, that, maybe only 15-20% of people who enter into that system ever make it to the point of getting housing. And there's another approach, which is called housing first, where the first thing you do with no requirements is you get people into stable housing. And once they're in stable housing, you then begin to have them work on any addictions, any other learning disabilities, any other job employment skill things. You do that second. And it's almost exactly the opposite. Like 80% of people who get housing first are successful in getting out of homelessness. And I'm like, one of these is trying to judge the person for being in the circumstance, and the other is trying to come alongside of and help the person get out of it. And we often think that we're doing justice when we say that, well, in order to get assistance, you need to do something. We need to require something. I mean, we feel that we're being holy and righteous by making requirements for people to receive compassion. And I'm like, that just totally misses what compassion is. Unlurk. I didn't know there was such a thing as unlurk. I've seen that even getting forms filled out is difficult for some homeless need. Yeah, it absolutely is. You have to have so many different requirements and prove so many different things, or even if we go with unemployment, which there's been a lot of because of COVID, there's this thought that people don't want to work. That's why they want to be on unemployment, and people want to stay on unemployment because they don't want to work. And we assign that to everyone who's on unemployment, regardless of how few people that might actually mean are really in that state who want to be on unemployment. And actually, if you really got down to the heart of it, they don't want to be on unemployment. Nobody would want that. Yes, there might be some people who don't want to work. That's different than wanting to be on unemployment. Yeah, I love the idea of housing. I just, like I said, in the last month I saw that. Probably in the last 2 weeks I saw that. I'm fascinated by that idea. I don't know if or how or a place that I might be able to introduce that to my state in some capacity, or just locally, but I'm going to explore that at some point. Do you think we've been brought up in a culture that is persuading many into believing the government should do this role instead of the church doing their role? Well, I think in some ways, yes. That'd be the short answer. But some of it, I could say, is the church abdicated its responsibility to do this in some ways, and in some ways the government has stepped into taking over these areas. And so I don't think it matters if the government is doing some of these things. It should still be that the church, and when I say the church, any church, any religious people, any nonprofit organization, any of those. So I'm going to include everyone in it. We should look for the needs of the people in our community and seek to meet those needs. We should look to see what resources we have that maybe could go beyond our community and share those resources in other places. Let me just say if there's another piece of this passage that... no. Yeah, I guess here's another one. Anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister. And I don't think that this passage is thinking of only your brother and your sister. It certainly would have been an easy thing in the first century to think about your brother and sister, and Jesus addresses us when he's talking about, or he addresses the question, who's my neighbor, and he tells the story of the Good Samaritan and expands it. That group of people certainly wouldn't be included, right? Well, Jesus says no. It's everybody. Everybody's your neighbor, and really everyone is your brother or sister. Not just family biologically, but here's one of the things that I want to throw back, but it just never seems right to throw this back to people who are judgmental of people who are in whatever circumstance they're in, is to go and think about, well, if you are holding to Scripture, you're a Christian, and you believe that Adam and Eve were the first two people and that we're all descendants of Adam and Eve, then they're your brother or sister, or fine, they're your cousin. I don't know how many, great, or I don't know how cousin stuff work. I never understood cousins. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. They're your 1,087th cousin. Why wouldn't you help them? Why wouldn't you reach out to them? And the passage even goes further. Anyone who hates their brother and sister is in darkness and walks around in darkness. Yeah, if you have such hatred, such disdain for someone else that you see, you're just living in darkness. You've got a dark heart. You don't have compassion. You don't have love. You can pretend that you have love. You can pat yourself on the back when you think you did something good. I think the older I get, the more that I tend to feel compassion for other people and their circumstances. Let me see if I can catch up on chat. I know someone who struggled 2 years to get disability despite documenting injuries and inabilities. The government is not good at this job. The church needs to take it on. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think in some ways, this is going to sound bad. In some ways, we've gotten the idea that what the church should be doing is gathering with only believers to worship together and to go away feeling better about ourselves so that we can feel good all week no matter what we do. And we've forgotten that even the people who are among us need help and the people outside of us need help. And we're walking around not addressing the needs and the hurts of people every day. And that's an easy thing to do. It's an easy thing to just look at them and, just any gathering of people, what are they choosing to wear? Does it look clean? Does it look new? That's one way to judge people. It's an easy way to judge people. And you never know. In fact, you get the whole kind of, there's all kinds of posts out there of people what they wear to Walmart. Okay, yeah. But sometimes when I'm going to Walmart, I don't care what I look like because I'm in the middle of doing a job around the yard, so I've got my grubby clothes on, and I'm just going to get something I need and come back, or I go to the hardware store looking kind of slovenly. I don't put on my best to go there, but I go out to eat with my wife. I'm going to dress a little nicer because of the company that I'm with. And so now you can judge me as well, a little dapper. And there's so many ways we judge people, and yet we want to think of people as individuals, but we judge them as being part of groups. That group over there is like this. The homeless are all there because, well, they're just lazy, or they're just unable to hold a job, or they're just all alcoholics, or they're just whatever, and people who are disabled, they did it to themselves, or they're just making excuses, and we really shouldn't help them, or people, whatever group. We can go with skin color. I'm not going to go into details there, but we can judge people based on skin color. We can judge people based on country of origin. And we don't take the realization in that we're a part of a lot of groups in ways that maybe have done harm to other people. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details because I don't know a lot of details. But when we start pointing the finger, I don't know if you ever remember this. My mom always said, and trying to make sure, when you're pointing the finger, you've got 3 fingers pointing back at you. And so if I look at and say, well, I have never owned a slave. I've never murdered anybody. Oh, great! Wow, I'm wonderful. I feel amazing about that stat. That's just an easy stat to throw around and say. So any of those problems related to anything that's ever happened with war, genocide, or slavery, I have no part of it. Well, on one side of my family, if I go back a few generations, we were in the Caribbean and we were had a plantation and we owned slaves. I don't know a lot of details. Don't know how many. It doesn't matter. That's part of my family tree. I go on the other side of the family tree and go back just a few generations, and we had Nazis. In fact, one of them was a general that was so high up he had a cyanide pill to be able to kill himself if he was caught. So, yeah, that's a thing. I can also go back and say, well, on one side of the family, there's people that were persecuted in Eastern Europe by another part of the family. And I can go back on the other side and say, well, there's potential Native American that we understand, and then you kept that quiet and you didn't talk about it, and so there'd have been persecution on that side. So I'm all of these things. They're all my heritage. They're all my history. And I need to live in light of my heritage and how I treat other people. So I don't know if that makes sense, if that's connecting in any way. But I think we have this thought of, well, I didn't do it. I don't have to do anything to fix it. Well, if there's a problem and you see something that you can do, you should do it. You should jump in. You should help. So, all right, let me jump back here. Stannis, fun fact. Tracking genealogy is limited to 7 generations because it goes below 1%, dividing 107 times, and you can see it. So, oh, I as soon as you say that, I'm like, yeah, that math makes a whole lot of sense. That's kind of cool. Oh, because of my first cousin, cousin's comment, yeah. But I mean, I'm just if you think through the logic of say, if you say I believe that everyone is a descendant of Adam and Eve, then we're all descendants of Adam and Eve. Therefore, we're all cousins at some level. That we just can't trace it, but we would be able to proclaim that we are. Oh, I hear that a lot too. But people will use that one person who is an alcoholic as an excuse not to help others. Nope. So fine, go give to the foster program. Then homeless kids aren't there because they're alcoholics. Yeah. And the thing is, they're really, and I'm going to say, I'll go back to this, that when people were judging Jesus and his disciples, and there's the example of the woman who breaks the oil over his feet and washes him and anoints him, that they judge Jesus and say, well, that and the person and say that shouldn't have happened. That should have been sold and the money given to the poor. And Jesus talks about how blessed this person's actions were. And also in there, and I think a couple other places, he talks about the poor will always be with you. Well, that's a wonderful thing if you think about it in one regard. There is no end to the amount of good that we can do in this world because there will always be poor among us. But it shouldn't be disheartening, because when we get to do that and we get to bring love to them, we get to be a part of God's actions of good in the world. And so it's amazing to see someone's life changed. I can't think of a better thing than this. And it doesn't mean their life has to be bad and awful, but just somebody whose life changes in a meaningful way. I don't find many things much better than that. I had an opportunity in South Dakota when I was there that an individual came to the church and had done some things that got him in trouble, and he had a court date about 6 months after coming to the church from things he did about a month after coming to the church. And so he asked, because he started Bible studies, he started dealing with some addiction issues and other things, and he was on the right track, I felt. And I thought, the worst thing that can happen for him now is to lose the support group that he has. He's never had a support group. I don't mean an addiction kind of support group. I mean a group of people that love him and are caring for him and have his best interests at heart, and they're not trying to take advantage of him, and they're not trying to see what they can get from him. He finally had a group that loved and supported him, and I thought, this is going to be awful. He's going to be removed from this group. He's going to be in prison for some period of time, and he's going to regress. He's going to go back to what happened before. So I wrote on his behalf to the judge and said I didn't believe this was in his benefit. I believe that he was remorseful. I believe he had changed, and I didn't think this was the right course for him. Judge disregarded that. Judge disregarded several other people's testimonies and said, no, doesn't matter. I'm sending him to prison. So I worked, because no one else in the congregation could go see him, because you're only allowed to have family members visit, can't have friends visit, or you can have clergy or people who are in certain, I don't know what the title is, but if you're in a recognized or designated organization that has privilege to come into the prison, if you get recognized by them, you can go access and see inmates. So the only visitations that were available were Friday night and Saturday morning, and usually his family came on Saturday morning. So I would go once a month, because I had to drive 2 hours to get to the prison and 2 hours back, and I was only allowed to visit him for 45 minutes. So I'm spending 4 hours on the road to go visit him for 45 minutes. Not that I'm not willing to, but I just couldn't put that in my schedule every week. So I went once a month, and I was amazed at what happened. Because the support group he had could not go visit him, he had letters sent to him like almost daily from someone in the congregation that was writing him letters. They would write a letter of encouragement. They'd include scripture, they'd include other things, and they'd send it off. And then he'd get another one. And so pretty soon what began to happen was his faith was encouraged and strengthened, but other inmates knew he got letters. And so they would come to him and say, do you have any letters that you can read to me? And so he would read letters that were sent to him, and then he would pass them out. He would share the letters of encouragement that he got with other people. So what I thought was going to be a bad circumstance actually turned into a blessing, because he was there all day long for months. And the only thing that he was able to do in his spare time, when you just had to stay in your room, I shouldn't say the only thing, but the thing he did most was read all of these letters of encouragement, all these letters of support. So it was a continuous, ongoing, just showering of love. And I unfortunately didn't get to see him when I was just in South Dakota. I'm not sure what happened when we weren't able to connect, but boy, that was just a fantastic demonstration of love. And the thing is I think we think of the task of being too large, and hence it's easier to not address a task or not begin a task because we can't solve the task. We can't solve homelessness, so let's not start. Or if we do attempt to start to try it, we're more interested in us looking like we're doing it or us feeling good about doing it than it actually accomplishing anything. And I'll throw an example out here, and maybe some of you aren't old enough to remember, or you're in another country so you're not aware of this, but there was this thing in, I believe it was 1986, that was called Hands Across America. So the idea was that we were going to link hands from coast to coast, and you had to pay $10 to stand in the line, and that all the money was going to go to help homelessness, and we were bringing awareness to homelessness. And so it happens, and there's lots of celebrities that are showing up, and so people are participating because not that they're worried about homelessness, but there's a chance that there might be a celebrity. And so there were cities where celebrities were announced, and the number of people that came to that city to be able to participate far exceeded the line, the capacity of where they were at. And then there were places in the middle of nowhere where nobody showed up because they really weren't concerned about homelessness. They just wanted to be able to say they were part of it, or they wanted and have that cloud and glory, or they wanted to see a celebrity. And afterwards, we still have homelessness. It didn't impact it. because it wasn't directed. I mean, I'm not saying anything as organizers or the idea. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the effectiveness of what happened didn't accomplish the goal. And I think if people would have focused on, are there homeless people in my community and what I can do to help a homeless person in my community, we would have had a bigger impact than what that actually did or accomplished. Miss Jellybeans, I really enjoy your chats on Twitch when I can catch you. Oh, thank you so much. I'm just trying to do what I can do, and hope it blesses people. So I'm happy to hear that. Hope you can be on Blessing Boat soon to get more followers and get to affiliate. You don't have to be a gamer, just do what you're doing now. Yeah, I may at some point in the future choose to add gaming or do a game stream here or there, but that's not going to be my primary thing. I'm going to chat. I did get invited, to let you know. I did get invited to Blessing Boat. However, I was gone to South Dakota when it was happening on Saturday, and I was in the airplane. I didn't even get to go and watch any of it, so I missed it. I don't know if there's a way. If you do know, if there's a way I can go back and find everybody's stream that was on there, I wouldn't mind going and watching some of that. But I don't know if there's a way to go do that in one place. This isn't a complete thought, but I've pondered a way to present it. How can a billionaire exist in the world and one person goes hungry for even a single day? We have several billionaires in the world, and they can make the world a better place for many people by ensuring that we have food every day. Feeding someone is making the world a better place, and it is a better place, and it is possible. It is doable. It is simple. That is a hard concept to wrap your brain around in lots of ways. However, I've seen people take the math on some of that kind of stuff. The thing is with homelessness or hunger, even if we took a billionaire's money, it might be a short-term solution, and we would still need an ongoing. Well, just think of refugees and things that are happening around the world where people are displaced either by natural occurrences, famine, flood, hurricane, earthquake, fire, any of those things, where they're naturally displaced and there's a need that arises there, or war. That's another occurrence where that happens. There still needs to be ongoing support, and so even if oh boy, what a great thought that'd be. Even if we could do it for one day, it would be still in the future new issues that would arise with it. But I understand your sentiment and your point. I think that's especially something people are asking right now when they look at a billionaire spending money to send people to space. I don't know how to wrap my head around that disparity. I don't necessarily focus on how much money someone has or doesn't have or what they do with it, because I know there are many people who are philanthropists who do good things with their money. In fact, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for just an example, they give a lot of their money to that. I believe I've heard things about their will and where they plan for all of their money to go when they pass away to be used. So there are many billionaires who do good things, and there are millionaires who do good things, and a lot of them do it quietly. Unfortunately, we don't always know that or see that. But I'm more concerned with what can I do than what somebody else isn't doing, if that makes sense. But yeah, definitely agree with what you're saying there. I stopped my gaming, put it on pause, and come here. Oh, well, thanks, Stannis. Thanks for coming here. Appreciate that. Okay, I hope this is a blessed conversation. Some of this isn't the most pleasant talk to talk about today. I don't know, it kind of went a little dark there and talking about how we don't do all that we should, but yeah, there are plenty of times where it's just fantastic to watch and see what we do. They do Blessing Boat once a month, so whenever you can. Yep. I can message you streamers who were on, and you can go back and check out their streams that day if they saved. Oh, that sounds great, Miss Jelly Beans. It doesn't have to be billionaires. No, that's what I was saying too. Yeah, it doesn't have to. We can start where we're at, even if we're not billionaires. I know someone who works with foster kids, and the numbers there say that if in America every Christian church adopted a foster church, the program would collapse. Oh, you need to. I'm trying to remember what it's called. Essentially, I believe that same idea that you're talking about right there happened in Denver. I think it's Denver. But where one church got that idea to adopt, I think it was Foster. I might be wrong on that. But I think it was Denver. I think it was Foster, where they were going to, or maybe it was orphans. It's been like a couple years since I've seen this. Anyway, they went through and adopted with that same idea that said if every church did this, there would be no lack of foster care in our city. And so now they have lists of people waiting to be foster parents. I think if I'm right, I may have the cause slightly off, but let's just go with that and say it's that. So they have people waiting to do that and meet the need, and greater than the need is there. So I think that was Denver. Maybe I can look that up and see if I can find that, and I'll message you that if I can find that later. I think in light of the point I presented, it can't be billionaires. It is a reflection of what is in their hearts. Yeah, and I think that's what this passage here is going to. It would be like asking a heroin addict how to quit drugs. Billionaires are money addicts, and they are sick, in my opinion. I don't think I've ever thought of that they're money addicts. It's an interesting perspective. I'm gonna have to give that some thought. Sometimes millionaires or billionaires may not be. They may have just had a great idea they created and they sold a company. Doesn't make them great people, but I'm just saying sometimes they get there because they created something that ended up being very effective in some ways. But sticking with it and trying to do more things, you might be onto something there. So maybe I don't think earning lots of money means they're evil, but certainly hoarding it is an indicator they are spiritually sick. Yeah. Well, there are people with little money that are spiritually sick. It doesn't mean that you have to have lots of money to be spiritually sick. In the world we live in, it is very easy to judge that group over there. Right now in the United States, it's very easy to say, well, if I'm of the Republican Party, that the Democrats are evil. If I'm of the Democratic Party, the Republicans are evil. It's very easy to say that if I am for the police, then Black Lives Matter is a horrible organization and they're causing riots. And if I'm for Black Lives Matter, it's very easy for me to say, well, then the police are the problem. And so it's very easy for us, no matter what the cause is or what our thoughts are, is to pick a scapegoat. And I think there's where some danger is rather than trying to work for solutions, is we judge other people, we step back and say we can't do anything, we think the problem is too overwhelming to begin, or we think there's too many problems and we can't figure out which one to solve. The thing is just, where is your heart have compassion? Where's your heart break? I tend to have my heart break for things that have impacted my life. I mean, that's just a reality of things. My heart breaks for pastors who are in other countries who don't have access to the theological education I have, or the library resources that I have, or all of the commentaries that I have, and they don't have access to Sunday school material or Bibles. This one broke my heart. I don't know, maybe I shared this before, but I'm going to share it again. When I went to Rwanda for the first time, I went to a pastor and Pastor Weiss conference to lead that. I was still in seminary, so I'm young whippersnapper thinking I'm good and doing great stuff and studying and all this. And one of the pastors at the conference was sharing a story about his access to any scriptural resources. He walked 5 hours every Friday to another village where a pastor loaned him his Bible for 1 hour so he could do all of his sermon study and preparation for Sunday and for his entire week. And then he walked back home 5 hours. I just couldn't comprehend this. I'm like, this is awful. How is it that even a pastor doesn't have resources? So myself and several other people, after sharing this with them and hearing about it, were like, how do we get them a Bible? What do we need to do? How much does it cost? Doesn't matter the cost. This pastor is not leaving this conference without a Bible. So we worked on that. We got that organized. We got Bibles for him. We got Bibles for everybody. We didn't care if they had a Bible. If you already had a Bible, great. Bless someone else with this Bible, or bless someone with your old Bible, whatever you want to do. But we were like, no, you're not leaving without a Bible in hand. And so we made that happen. And so now I just have this built-in burning desire to help Christians around the world get resources to help them grow spiritually. So I may share this more if you want to go look it up. It's called Resourcing Now. That's an organization I'm working with. I've been on the board there for years. We get Christian literature, Bibles, tracts, Sunday school material, Bible study stuff, other things, and we ship it primarily to the Caribbean and Central America, and we've been doing that for years. And so I'm in the process of working myself into the position that's going to be doing the English literature. I'm not going to go into a lot of details. I don't want to take that time on the stream here. Maybe someday I'll do a stream about it, but it comes from that passion that I have because of an impact in my life. And so that impacts me. I'm drawn to it. And there's other things that I'm drawn to as well, and I care about because either I've faced it or someone in my family has faced it, or a friend of mine has faced it, or someone in my congregation has faced it. And so it causes me to see the person in a different light, and I relate to it. And so that's where I choose to spend my time and effort in helping and reaching out. And maybe, there's something like that you're drawn to. Maybe I'm sensing ukulele there, that foster kids is something you're passionate about because something in there has impacted you. And I know you care about OCC and kids and making sure they have a Christmas gift. I think that those are things God puts on our heart where he gives us a little bit of breaking to allow us to see the world through his eyes. That's how I try to describe that. When my heart breaks and I have compassion, that's a little bit of me actually seeing the world through God's eyes and seeing the compassion that he has. And I get to then choose to be a part of helping in that circumstance and situation. So, yeah, I'm not saying anyone is evil. I'm looking at the fruits. Yeah, I understood that. I understood that. I wasn't thinking you weren't. And using the love of God is not on them, part of your sermon. Yep. I fully got that. I was just trying to make a distinction because I don't want to label everybody. That's also part of what I was talking about is it's a them over there kind of thing. And then what that allows us to do is to never engage and never see people as who they are because we're part of the collective. And I know I was talking the other way earlier and saying, well, sometimes we only see individuals and we need to understand our responsibility to the collective. So yeah, it's the world. In some ways, if we talk about things, well, solving hunger should be simple. We have just massive amounts of land that produces food, and we have massive amounts of food that are thrown away, that rot, that go to waste. Why can't we figure this out? And why can't we help people? And then why do we allow interference with helping people? I say that in the sense of when you do have food pantries or shelters that provide food, you can't just take your food there and give it to them. There's regulations that get in the way of you giving to those. Doesn't prevent you from, this is what my mom does, but this is the community she lives in. So this is everybody up and down her strip of the road there. She makes something, she has extra, she goes to the neighbor and she brings it to him. Here, I made this. And she brings them. It's like, for instance, she lives alone. So if she makes a pan of lasagna, she takes lasagna over to the neighbors and brings them lasagna. She makes a cake. She brings it over to the neighbors and makes them a cake so that she can have a piece. So she does things like that. And her neighbors do similar things. My dad worked at Heinz. And so we go to the company store and buy pickles for pennies. And ketchup, and we'd bring them up there and share them with the neighbors at the cost we got them with, because at that time, to get a jar of pickles shipped and they could go to the store and get them, a jar of pickles was like $6 for a pint. And we could buy a case of quart jars for $5. Well, bring them up there. So we'd bring them pickles and ketchup, and they'd give us fresh caught fish. I thought this was a great trade. Pickles for fish. I thought that was super awesome. But anyway, that was my experience with that. So let's see. Yeah, that's awesome. Sharing resources is fantastic. Yeah, and if we all did that, none of our neighbors would starve. I know that. The thing is right now in the middle of COVID, while I might like to do that, I don't know who'd be receptive. That's one issue in my particular neighborhood of who would be receptive. However, I do love, or I do have the capacity, and my garden didn't allow me to this year. I do usually have a garden, and sometimes I have an abundance of squash and zucchini, and my plants were just awful this year. I had a bee issue, and I didn't get good pollination, so I didn't get a lot of vegetables. But I can just put a stand by the road and say free, and people will stop and pick up vegetables. So that's a different way I can approach things with my neighbors, which I've done before, which is kind of cool. All right. Well, thank you all. This was a great chat today, at least for me. And I'm going to have to go look at my slides here and figure out what is in order and out of order. They seem to not be the way I intended them. I'm going to double check that before Sunday to make sure my slides are good, because I went in a direction I haven't done before. I just brought in the passage I've been studying all week for my sermon, and just because I just can't get past thinking about it. So thanks for sharing your perspective on Elon Musk. It is an answer to a prayer for me seeking guidance about me withdrawing my investments in his works just the other day. Yeah, well, here's what I would say in regard to investments. If there is something you're convicted about and that's driving you to feel you shouldn't be invested in something, then I would say you shouldn't be invested in something. I'll give an example that's an older one. Apartheid was happening in South Africa. And in the 80s, there were a lot of people's retirement money that was invested in South Africa. And the church started talking about apartheid and how appalling it was. And churches and people who were in those churches started taking their money out of any company that was in South Africa to help send a message that they didn't agree with this. So people did it because of their convictions. And so if there's something you're convicted about, your money should not go to something and benefit that kind of activity, then absolutely yes, I think that is something you should do. If it's not, I'm not necessarily the boycott type of person. For instance, if I disagree with Target's position or Walmart's position or something like that, I'm going to stop shopping there. I'm not that kind of person, because I think that it hurts the employees that work there. So if I can make a distinction there, I hope that makes some sense to you. I'm going to take a look over here. Yeah, you'll see me. This will look weird, but I'm going to start to see who is on that I can go raid. Okay, so the lift. Oh, Pastor Brock VR. Is he in VR? Let me see a second.
For me,
That's going to give me a dumb ad.
What ifs. Like, what if it takes place
If I was smarter here and knew more, I could have
black.
hid this so you didn't have to watch the ad there, but it's over in the corner.
That's not right.
I'll figure it out eventually.
What if it happens in the...
Yeah, get done with the ad so I can see if he's actually in VR or if he's just on. Says today's appointed text. So I've never raided Pastor Brock because he's usually on before me. This will be fun to raid him. Oh, he's talking. Okay. You answered that for me. All right, we're going to raid Pastor Brock. This is going to be fun. So... Oh, I put question mark. My typing is awful. What? We all endure ads, no worries. Yeah, well, I meant I could have hid it from being on the screen, but I'm not that savvy yet. Let's see, make sure I spell it right. Yeah, thanks, Miss Jellybeans. If you can send me a screenshot. Oh, I'm not on Discord, but if you just hit me with a whisper, should be able to do it that way. I'll figure out Discord at some point. Right now, I'm not on. I'm not on any of those kind of other things. I'm just trying to get my feet under me of what I can do and what I understand, and we'll go from there. So, thank you all. I hope you have a blessed weekend.
Like, you can do that. And I would submit to you that a lot of people, like, there was a guy just this today who was dropping this comment on one of my YouTube videos about the Trinity. And he's like, well, the Bible says this on this particular verse. I'm like, okay, so sir, am I supposed to say his name was, well, we'll just call him C. That was the first name of his that was the first letter of his first name. So C, are you telling me that I should disregard all Christians for the first several hundred years of the Christian church, Christians who bled and died for their love of Jesus? They're all wrong, but I should go with C. I should go with C's interpretation of Scripture. Like, I'm not going, like, see, here's the thing, man, is that, like, I get things wrong, right? And you recognize that too. Like, I mean, anybody who's listening to me stream tonight, I think you've grown in terms of